Number 2 on the helicopter noise hit parade for Long Island is Suffolk County's Francis Gabreski Airport in West Hampton. Despite the addendum on the sign, "Fly neighborly." Gail Clymer, what's the situation with helicopter noise here at Gabreski Airport in West Hampton?
Well, it's still pretty bad where I live, which is off to the southwest of the airport and a place where the helicopters are not supposed to be flying over residential areas.
The airport management has promised, as I understand it, that helicopters wouldn't fly over populated areas.
Well, there's a community advisory board that was established a couple of years ago, which has a noise abatement committee, and the committee, working together with pilots from, that use the airport, have put together some guidelines for where the helicopters and the jets and other planes are supposed to go. And the basic idea is they're supposed to come in and out over the Sunrise Highway, up here over the Pine Barrens, where nobody's living to be disturbed. And some of them are doing it, but some of them are not.
And what about airport management? Has it tried to get those pilots that don't fly that route to do it?
Well, they've been working on it. They've certainly made an effort. They have, distributed these brochures that were produced by the Noise Abatement Committee to pilots that are known to, or airport company, helicopter companies that are known to use the airport. But the compliance is still not very good, and the problem, I believe, is that the airport management is not identifying the violators. When a helicopter lands here at Gabreski, they normally go to one of the fixed base operators, principally a company by the name of Malloy. The airport manager doesn't have any record of helicopter A arrived here at 2:10 p.m. on Thursday afternoon. He has no information. He has been asking Malloy for a year or so to kindly provide him with information about, this helicopter came in, when it came in, when it went out, who the operator was, and so on. And Malloy has really not been very cooperative, and the result is that the airport manager just doesn't have that information, even though he committed himself in an agreement that I think Senator Schumer brokered late last year to reporting on violations. Well, you can't really report if you don't know who the violator is. I have, starting in March of this year, I started with every time I complained about a helicopter, I asked specifically who is the operator. I started doing that in the middle of March. Over the next 3 months, I filed about 40 complaints about helicopters flying over my house. One of those has been identified to me. Now, maybe there's some slippage in there. As far as I can figure out, overall, less than a quarter of the violators are being identified. By that I mean helicopters flying over residential areas in contravention of the recommendations that have been made.
How does this affect your life, having the helicopters roar overhead?
Well, one of the problems is that they don't fly as high as they're supposed to. If they were all flying at 2,500 feet, which is what's been recommended, by the time they're any distance from the airport, it wouldn't be a problem. But they're not flying at that level. They're flying a couple hundred feet. And so, you hear this chop, 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 coming in from the distance, and pretty soon it's over your house or almost over your house, and you can kind of feel it, You the dishes are kind of vibrating in the kitchen cupboards, which is not a very pleasant way to live.
Tony Siglio, you're the manager here at Gabreski Airport, and in terms of the hit parade of noise complaints, after the East Hampton Airport, Gabreski Airport comes in at number 2.
Yes, you're correct. We have had a program for the last 2 years, a voluntary noise abatement program, which also made the community aware of what we were trying to do here to reduce noise. And one of those things that we did was institute a noise complaint hotline. So as people are becoming aware of that hotline, more and more people are complaining about the noise surrounding the airport.
Now, you've also tried to get the helicopter pilots to travel on a northern route along Sunrise Highway and so forth. Has it worked?
In my estimation and from my observations at the airport, yes, it has worked or is working. I think there's still a long way to go, but a lot of the helicopter pilots are cooperating when they can.
Now, I spoke to Gail Clymer. She lives south of the airport, which is just the opposite direction from this route in and out that you've tried to get the helicopter pilots to adhere to. Do you think you'll be able to convince those helicopter pilots that fly directly over her house, very low, to try this northern route?
Well, we certainly have convinced them to try the northern route. Unfortunately, Ms. Klima lives in the approach to our main runway at the airport. While we've tried to get a lot of the helicopters and aircraft to fly in from the north, there are certainly some that are going to continue to fly that way for several reasons. One, because they're used to flying that way, and it's going to take a little bit more time to get them aware to fly in a different location. And the second thing is the runway is aligned with her house about 1.5 miles from the end of the runway. And in bad weather, that's one of the instrument approaches to the airport is directly over that area.
And the helicopters function on instrument approach too?
Yes, several of them do. Not all of them, but a lot of them do. And in weather like today, when the clouds are low, they'll fly an instrument approach into the airport. It's the only way they can get in and get here safely.
Do you think voluntary restrictions work, or do you think maybe it's time to, I mean, you work for the County of Suffolk. The Federal Aviation Agency is a U.S. government entity. I mean, there's a lot of government involved in aviation. I mean, would it be possible for the government to say, hey, you guys fly, if you're going to fly in and out on that, I mean, require the helicopter pilots to behave in a certain way?
The federal government could certainly attempt to do that, but what happens is there are implications not only at this airport in this area. It could affect how aircraft or helicopters fly throughout the United States. This program for voluntary noise abatement for helicopters was developed with input from the community, particularly people like Ms. Klima and people in the noise-sensitive areas that are around the airport. What we tried to do was define routes that would least affect the noise-sensitive areas by having aircraft come in through the Pine Barrens, the wooded areas to the north of the airport and particularly to the west. For departures, if aircraft had to go over the noise-sensitive areas, we actually are telling them to turn westbound before Montauk Highway and then climb up to 2,500 feet before they go over the noise-sensitive areas. The reason being that the higher the aircraft is, the lower the noise impact is going to be on the ground. So we tried to, again, with input from the community and helicopter companies, determine areas that were going to be a lot less noise sensitive by using these routes.
But the difference between, I don't know, theory and practice seems to be a problem. I mean, that's the plan, but has it been adhered to?
I would say, and talking to our air traffic controllers, because this is a controlled airport, I was just up there on Saturday, they're estimating about 70% of the helicopters that come in here now are following these routes, which again leaves 30% that are not. 30% are affecting a lot of the people down and around the airport.
And you can't do anything about those 30%?
Well, we can, and we are taking complaints from the local residents. When we can identify that helicopter, we're sending out our noise brochure, which looks exactly like this, to those companies and requesting their compliance next time they fly in. I'm also requesting that they call in if they have any questions, and I have received some calls with questions about when and why and how we're doing this, and they a lot of them assured me that if they could, if the traffic and the weather didn't come into play, they would follow these routes.
Are you able, however, to identify these offenders? Gail Clymer says that in her experience there's been difficulty finding out who's been making all this noise.
Well, we have been able to identify many of the complaints. I'm not saying all of them, but many of the complaints were identifying the helicopters and sending out the information. What we're not doing, though, is transmitting that information each time to people that make the complaints. Because we're a small airport, I have a small staff, it just would add a tremendous amount of time and effort to be able to send that information back and forth. So what we're doing is and we feel it's a positive impact. We're sending the information out to the pilots, the people that are flying these routes.
In terms of approaches to airports, I mean, things are pretty well formalized. It isn't, a kind of a potluck and airplane pilots can do what they wanted, but it seems in this helicopter field, there's a lot of wiggle room.
Well, and there can be. Again, fixed-wing aircraft have to descend and ascend in a more of a less of a long straight pattern. Helicopters can come in, land in a certain spot, location on the airport called a helicopter landing area, and they don't need that long straight in. It's a much shorter approach path for them, so that they can, there's more flexibility.
In terms of the identification of offenders, one of the things that Gail Clymer complained about was that she's been trying to find out the people, the names, the individuals who are running these helicopters that fly over her house. And she said I think it was 40 complaints that she's made to you or to the airport here, she's only been able to get the identity of one of the offending helicopter operations.
I don't necessarily agree with the number of people that she's been able to ascertain. Every complaint she makes, we try to get the offending aircraft from one of our fixed base operators, basically a gas station for airplanes. We have not been able to get all of them, but I would say a majority of them we are getting, and we're sending letters out to those companies informing them of our voluntary procedures. And I just want to make a point of that, too, that the procedures are voluntary. It's not mandatory right now. So when we send those letters out, we're requesting the cooperation of the operators to follow the procedures. And I think we're getting a pretty good feedback from the operators. Again, by my observations, we're seeing a lot of aircraft, a lot of helicopters take off and land to the north.
Has it gotten better this year than last year? What do you think?
I would say, based on the complaints, it hasn't gotten better. Based on observations of where the helicopters are coming from and going to, I think it's gotten better. We are also receiving feedback from the helicopter operators when we do send out letters and make them aware they're flying over noise-sensitive areas. And they're asking us, well, what do you want us to do differently? We see the procedures. We're trying to fly according to those procedures every time we can. But if we fly a little bit this way or a little bit that way and it gets us over houses, what more can we do? If it's an air traffic problem, what more can we do? We're trying everything we can.
In terms of traffic to Gabreski from New York City back and forth by helicopter, it seems to be an increasing phenomenon.
Yes, I'd agree with that. I think last year, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I think we saw about a 30% increase in helicopter traffic over the previous year.
These are $100 and $150 at Southampton Village's helipad, and that doesn't discourage helicopter traffic at all. This is the Village of Southampton's little helipad. Little, but the site of much noise, too. Next to the Southampton Village helipad, on Meadow Lane in Southampton, a sign of the time or a sign of the noise?
Well, what I've been working on over the last 6 months is a strong initiative trying to get the helicopter pilots to approach from the north and depart to the north. A lot of the local residents recognize the need of the helipad. I mean, all you have to do is drive down Meadow Lane and Jenna Lane. You realize that some of our more significant taxpayers in the Village of Southampton utilize that as a form of transportation to and from the city. Part of the reason why they bought in the Village of Southampton and reside here is because of the easy access to the helipad. So I think it's an important asset of the village. The residents who have complained in reference to the helipad have all been just in reference to approach and departure paths of the helicopter pilots. And, we've done NOTAMs. I've met with David Nuss from the Eastern Region Helicopter Association. He's been in constant contact with a variety of pilots, met with a bunch of different pilots around, and we've talked about trying to prevent individuals from departing over the dunes or departing over the houses down there. Part of the issue with the helipad is that you have service helicopter pilots could come out and they sell a service, and they don't know their client who they're being picked up. They don't know the type of car that they drive. So what happens is they end up circling the helipad for a period of time trying to do a pickup and trying to figure out when the individuals they're picking up have arrived. And working with the helicopter pilots, we've put a code enforcement individual down on Sunday afternoons, which seems to be the peak time frame for the area, just to do some communication to allow the individuals being picked up to notify the helicopter pilot. And that will eliminate a lot of the significant noise. Helicopter noise is a problem across Long Island. I know that Senator Schumer has been very active in trying to design approach and departure paths, minimizing impact on the residents. It's the same as the train or the buses or just your car. It's a mode of transportation that individuals who have the ability to afford it utilize.
They'll even compare to, well, the use of Gabreski Airport or the East Hampton Airport. This little helipad is a busy place.
Yes, Carl, that's what's really shocking, is our helipad is a simple 50 by 60 foot piece of asphalt located on a 100-foot wide lot within several hundred feet of houses and located near the county park. Compare this to Gabreski Airport and East Hampton Airport, which are major airport facilities. But now compare the use. Our consultant, Robert Grotel, estimated that there were 1,100 landings during a 3-month period, June, July, and August, in 2006. Compare this to Gabreski, where the number of landings was, I think it was about 800 during a 4-month period, and East Hampton Airport, where they were about 1,700 during a 4-month period. What that means is that we had about 150%, 1.5 times the number of landings, helicopter landings at Gabreski, and about 2/3 the number of landings at East Hampton Airport. All this on our little 50 by 60 foot piece of asphalt. To me, that's shocking when you compare the use to the nature of the three facilities. And that to me shows that the use of this property as a full-time helipad is completely inappropriate. There is significant risk of accident, significant danger to surrounding properties.
And that's beyond the noise.
Yes, beyond the noise, that's a problem in itself. So at least this is a nuisance which is inconsistent with the way Southampton Village should be, and at worst, it's a disaster waiting to happen.
Now, when Mayor Epley says, well, a lot of the people that use this helipad are big taxpayers here in the village, so he's not looking, it seems to me, for aggressive action in terms of that helipad. How do you react to that?
Well, I think his concern is for a relatively few people. I think rather than addressing the concerns of a few taxpayers, he should be looking at the concerns of the entire village. And I feel that the best interest of the entire village is to eliminate the use of this facility as a helicopter pad. I feel he's more concerned with the interests of a few than with the interests of a many. Thank you.
Councilwoman Nancy Grabowski, you've been deeply involved on this issue of helicopter noise. The summer has begun. The helicopters are back and almost, if not exactly, as noisy as ever.
Well, for some people, some people are still being impacted, I'm going to have to say. People in North Sea and people in the Sag Harbor area in particular are the people that I'm hearing from. I've had a number of phone calls come into my office. I believe it was last Friday night. My house was buzzed coming in, and the same guy must have buzzed going out, and he was flying way, way too low. So the word has gotten out to some, and I'm hearing out there from, the people who are behind this initiative to try and work the voluntary compliance with the Eastern Regional Helicopter Pilots Association, that, there's a percentage that's being touted out there. They're getting 60%, 65%. I'm not sure that's going to do it, and fortunately, I deal, largely with East Hampton Airport complaints. I live in the eastern end of the town. We're hoping that as people are confronted on the runway, and thanks to the airport manager there, Jim Brundage, who is really proactive, and his assistant, Matt, they'll go right out and do a meet and greet on the runway if they see that, somebody is just not getting it. So we're hoping that it'll get better, but, we're looking to make sure that our concerns are communicated, and that those people who have the ability to make the difference know that we're not as happy as we wish we were.
The noise hotspots, East Hampton Airport seems to be number one. Then you have Gabreski, which is a county airport in West Hampton. Then you have this helipad in Southampton Village. Describe the differences in terms of noise between those three fields.
Well, the main difference for Gabreski is that there is a control tower there. So I'm hoping that with the routes that are recommended, plus the addition of the control tower, that those helicopters are going to be coming in from, I believe they're coming in over that northerly route, over the Pine Barrens, where the number of single-family dwellings is very low. If there are those routes that are coming in over the water, my hope would be that they stay at that recommended height, which I believe is 3,000 feet, until they get within very close proximity to the airport. With the helipad, which is further down the beach here, I was just speaking with Mayor Mark Epley of the village of Southampton, and he was telling me that their recommended route is coming, across the bay, and then either cutting out at some point where there are very few houses, or going out over the Pine Barrens. But, they seem to indicate there might be some progress, but, it's not quite where it needs to be yet either. So East Hampton Airport, there's a lot of traffic in and out of East Hampton Airport that, really dramatically increases, I would say, once we get to Memorial Day weekend, and then running right up through Labor Day, and that would probably be Thursday night, Friday night, and then a pickup again on Sunday night and Monday morning. So, we've been working at this for a long time. We're hoping that the East Hampton Town Board will proceed with the two major recommendations in the draft master plan, that being to put the automated weather observation system in, the AWAS, and to also put in the seasonal air traffic control tower that could be operational, say, from April 15th to October 15th. And were those two strategies to be in place, then the incoming and outgoing aircraft would have to follow a prescribed flight path in and out of the airport, which at the moment they do not. The airport does not have a control tower, so that's critically important in my view.
At this point in East Hampton, I mean, it's the Wild West in terms of helicopter flight paths, or the Wild East.
Well, with the increase in air traffic in the summertime, certainly, safety, both of those people in the air and those people on the ground, is our paramount concern.
Supervisor Bill McGinty of the town of East Hampton, you have the town-owned East Hampton Airport, which appears to generate more noise from helicopters than any other airfield on eastern Long Island.
Well, I guess we've become a destination. Helicopters seem to be the major mode of travel now at the airport, particularly in the summer months. The people are visiting from Manhattan and the greater metropolitan area. So,
and it's at quite a cost. I mean, it's quite a cost for these rather wealthy folk from Manhattan who can pay the price of flying to the Hamptons and back from the Hamptons by helicopter. But the cost in peace and quiet to the people on the ground, I mean, that's enormous.
It's really changed the dynamic of the community. A lot of people come out here because of the open space that we preserved, and because of the quietness during most of the months. It gets a little hectic in the summertime. So there's a little bit of a conflict. You have people that are trying to avoid the traffic on the roadways to get out here, and I'm supportive of people coming here and spending their money and visiting the community, but at the same time, it is creating an enormous problem for other homeowners in the community.
What's being done about it?
Well, we have passed legislation, but again, it has to be voluntary and it's not mandatory, asking our pilots to come in at a certain height at certain routes. There was not as much compliance as we wished. We invested in a tracking device that would identify offenders where we could come out and speak to them and say, look, we don't want you in our airport if you're not going to follow the rules. It wasn't until Senator Schumer stepped in recently, through pressure not just from us, from other communities, where he pushed to have the same type of voluntary deal done with the pilots, but they seem to agree more readily with Senator Schumer than they have with us over the years. So hopefully it will work. The early results are not great, but again, I have met with representatives from the Helicopter Association, and they need time to get the word out. So we're looking to have an upward trend and hopefully have, I would like to see 100% compliance, but you know, in school, a passing grade is always a passing grade, so I'm looking for anywhere from 75 to 100% compliance by the summertime. And then we'll work on those few remaining groups that are unwilling to comply to these standards.
How are you going to work on the resistant groups?
Peer pressure. You know what, those people who are transporting people out here have an investment in what they're doing. And although we have difficulty controlling the air, because we don't have a control tower and because of FAA rules, we do control the ground on our own airport. And there are some issues with helicopters that are of concern to them that make travel to and from East Hampton easier. And so we will work with them. We will negotiate with them on these issues. A lot of it has to do with the hot loading. It's probably not the proper terminology, but the loading of passengers and the taking off of passengers with the rotors running. It's dangerous, but it's also very time-consuming for them to turn them on and turn them off. So we're negotiating with them now, requiring the presence of individuals to walk the passengers to and from the helicopters. But you know, we do have controls on the ground, and I think if we have a mutual respect and cooperation for what we're trying to do here, it'll all work out.
Supervisor McGinty, there's a strange passage in the master plan for the East Hampton Airport about helicopter routing, and it says one wonderful routing in terms of noise would be from the ocean, from the Atlantic, up through Georgia, right to the airport, a quick. But then it goes on to say this is, well, in effect, not feasible, not practical because of the high real estate values of that strip. I mean, the Georgia area is where a lot of very rich people live. What do you think of that?
Well, generally what happens is they present different routes and they present the pluses and minus. I think that was presented that would be a minus. It wouldn't preclude that route from being included, but those are some of the issues that when they do a full analysis that the board should take into consideration, as opposed to another route where they'd say it's less populated, so it might be a better way to come in. But I can see how that would be misconstrued, but we're looking for the best route, and if there is no best route, I think the board is looking for a sharing of the unhappiness. So, you know, we might be able to move those routes around, particularly if we move forward with the seasonal tower. That would decide the direction and the height that they would come in. So not everybody would be bombarded all the time. It would be sharing the difficulties.
That was a kind of a preposterous concern. That preposterous might not be the wrong word. Outrageous might be a better term for that concern. I mean, the fact that these people are rich and those people are not rich shouldn't preclude the rich folk from sharing with the pain.
No, I agree. And just so nobody misconstrues that was prepared by consultants who have done other airport master plans. So they threw that information. It is by no means the opinion of my office or the board. We are looking for the best ways that we can mitigate noise throughout the town on helicopter traffic.
Will anything be done about the racket of helicopters on eastern Long Island, in fact, the New York metropolitan area and elsewhere? That very much remains to be seen and heard. I'm Karl Grossman. This has been a special report on WVVH-TV, Hamptons Television. Thank you for watching.